Using formulas is extremely useful in Excel, and one of the most versatile formulas you can have is the if statement. So every formula starts with an equals, and it's going to look something like this. Equals if, and then an open parentheses, and then you have the test. So it can be equals if this cell is greater than 3,000, for example, then give it a 1, otherwise give it a 0. This is useful in data, for example, if you're working with the NLSY data and it lists somebody's gender and it actually says male or female. You'd have to turn all of that into a number in order for a regression analysis to work. So you could say, for example, equals if that cell equals female, comma, 1, else, comma, 0. Right? So then every female would get a 1, every male would get a 0. You should note that if you're using numbers, you can just do equals or greater or less than signs. If you're referring to text, you would have to put it in quotes, right? So if what I was looking for is the text, then I would put it in quotes. Here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to resort all of my data. So I'm going to Control A. I got everything here. I'm going to sort this first by state, and then I'm going to sort it by, I can sort it by whatever I want, but I'll do it by county alphabetically. So it's going to give me all the Minnesota counties first, and then when I scroll down here, now we'll see all the Wisconsin counties. So again, imagine you're doing this for the entire United States, and you want to come up with a sum of the population for all of Minnesota added up by county. So for example, you might be trying to determine county level population as a function of a variety of variables. One of them might be the overall population for the state as a whole. Right? That's something you might think about. So here's what I want to do. I want to find a running total. Right? If this were time series data and I were adding things up over years, that would be simple because I'd know that if I had 10 years of data, then I would just add up 10 cells and I'd go down and add up the next 10 cells, and I could just sort of copy this in blocks of 10 and copy the block of 20 and paste it, and then you can copy the block of 40 and paste that. And so you can kind of just paste it down and it'll fill it up. But when you're dealing with something like counties, where every state has a different number of counties, you can't do that. So here's what I want to do. So I'm going to call this first one 2010A, just for the heck of it. And what I'm going to do is for the very first one, I'm going to say that this cell is going to be equal to the population for Aitkin. And then what I'm going to do is the next cell is going to be equal to the population of Anoka plus this cell L2. What this is going to do is basically get a running cumulative total for everything, right? So it goes like this and keeps adding to it what all of those are. And keeps doing that. But on my own, I have to know where to stop it and then to start over, right? Because now I'm on the first one in Wisconsin. Now I want to start with just the 2882. I don't want to keep adding to this. So what I want to actually do is create an if statement. So I'm going to ignore the first one here, because you always have to start with 1. But then for this one, what I'm going to say is, if the state is the same as the state that was in the previous cell, right? So if Anoka is in Minnesota, which is the same as Aitkin, which is in Minnesota, then I'm going to add those two numbers. But if it's not, I'm going to start over. So here's what this is going to look like. So I'm going to say this is equals if this text is equal to the one before it, meaning it's still another county in the same state as the one before it, then I'm going to do the cumulative total, C3 plus L2. Otherwise, I'm going to start over at just the population in that county. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my cell over to the right until it turns to a plus. I'm going to double click. With double clicking, we'll fill in that equation for the whole way, all the way down, as long as there is numbers and text in 2018 in this column. If there were a break in here, it would stop at that break because it assumes that you want it to stop there. So now I'm going to scroll down and watch what happens when we get to Wisconsin. Oh, it knew there was a difference there because of what happened before. But if I hit this again, now it knows and it takes a break and starts over. So I could have all 50 states with all different counties, and I can create that one if statement with the equation, and it's going to fill in all of the totals for me. And then what I can do, here's the other thing that you can do. This is giving me a running total, but that's not entirely what I want, right? What I wanted was just the total. So now, let me caution you here. If you were going to do this for every year, for 2011 and 2012 and 2013 and like that, here's what you want to do. First, B3 and B2 are going to stay fixed. So everything is going to be relative and everything is going to move over by 1 as I add up and it goes to the next population for the next year. So that's relative cell reference. But the state name is absolute reference. So the state name, you put a $ in front of the B and in front of the 3 and a B and the 2. Then it's going to lock that in and it's always going to be looking for those 2. Now here's the problem. Even when I scroll down, it's always going to be looking for 3 and 2. So what I want to do is just put the $ on the B. That means it's going to lock it into this column. But as I move down, it's going to continue to keep looking for the next one and the next one and the next one so that it knows we're in the same state. All right, so I've got that. And actually, look at the population of Wisconsin, 5690. That's pretty close to Minnesota, 5,300. 5.3 million. So watch, if I take this again for 2010 and I copy it, Control C, and then I go over here and I do Control V, paste, this is going to now do my totals for 2011 and then 2012. So I've created this one equation and copy, paste, and then I'm going to paste that all the way down. So I can do these for all of these years, right? So if I wanted to do it, I would do all 8. Now again, the problem is this is giving me running totals and I just want the absolute total for the state, which basically means the following. I want the last one for Minnesota, right? That's what I want here. I want the last one for Minnesota. So there's 2 ways of doing this. One way to do it is to use an if statement that says, I guess I'll show you. One is to use an if statement where it's looking for whether the name below it is different. And if the name below it is different, then you want to put in that value. So I could actually do this equation a couple of ways. One way is going to be like this, equals if this one, so I'm doing the second to last one, but if that cell is equal to the cell below it, meaning I don't have the last county yet, there's still one more county to go, then I want to leave it blank. And the way you do a blank is to do 2 sets of quotes, right? Because when you do quotes, that's looking for text. So I have quotes on both sides and there's nothing in between, so it's going to give me a blank. But if it's not that, meaning I'm going to be in the last county, then I want to reveal what the actual cumulative total was, which was this. So watch, let me just show you what happens here. So for this one, since it's not the last county, it's giving me a blank. But if I copy this and paste it below, it's going to reveal that. So that's one way to do it, is to go to the second to last one and create your equation there, and then knowing that it's not going to hold in your last one. That's one way to do it. The other way you could do it is just with the numbers, right? We're doing a cumulative total, and every time it's adding, right? So one way to do it would be to say, if the cell below it is less than the cell above it, then we must have jumped to a new state, right? That will work except for one very important situation, which is suppose you had a really small state with a very small population and the first county alphabetically in the next state was really big. Then you might not actually catch that because that condition wouldn't hold. So if you're just using state names the way I've done it here, then you've got it. And if I do this all the way down, you're going to get the total for Wisconsin either. So there you go. A couple ways of using if statements. And then what I would do, first thing you need to keep in mind is when you're using if statements, it's all based on the way things look. If I were to ever sort this data right now, all of this would change because all the relative references go away and it gets crazy. So the thing you want to do is 2010 T for totals. You want to make sure that all the stuff you had that was if statements and equations, you copy it, Control C, and then you right click and paste special as values. That's what this paste with the 1, 2, 3 looks like. Meaning it's replacing my equations with actual numbers. And now I could sort this all day and everything would stay the same. So make sure you've done all your equation work first and then when you're done with it and you're good with it, then you can replace it as text. What I usually do when I'm working on it is I have one set of data where I would keep the equation so I can go back to them later, and then I would add a second sheet where I copy it and paste it as values. Then I can play around with all those. But here's what I do. So 2010, I'm only interested in the totals. I'm not interested in the cumulatives. So what I do is I highlight all my data, and I sort it by 2010. So I'm going to delete this level. I'm going to sort it by the 2010 total. And what that's going to do is pull those two totals to the top. So if I had all 50 states, what I'd see is I had 50 of these, which were basically the total population of all 50 states. And then everything below it, I could just delete and get rid of if I wanted to. So there you go. Use if statements in creative ways. And if you're having difficulty and you're not quite sure how to do something, let me know. I used it in my PhD dissertation when I was adding totals across a variety of things. There's so many different ways that you can do them. There's always a way to solve the problem. You just have to try to figure it out with the if statement. And if you can't, hit me up.